Chapter 25, Cartel Wives.
Crossing the border. Olivia. Nuevo Laredo was the closest border crossing to Guadalajara, and it was a 12-hour drive away. I knew Nuevo Laredo all too well. It's where I was arrested when I was a teenager. Unfortunately, it wasn't just the center of my drug smuggling. In 2008, it was ground zero for cartel violence. The Gulf.
She's on her getaway route, and she's going through places that she's familiar with. Why? Because she went to jail there as a teenager. That's the kind of life that woman lived. You know what I'm saying? Bananas.
The Gulf Cartel had always ruled Nuevo Laredo, and their armed wing, Los Zetas, did their bidding when they needed to fight the police, the government, rival cartels, or members of their organization who'd wronged them. Los Zetas were ruthless. Gunfights and kidnappings were common, but in one attack, the militia cut out 6 victims' hearts, carved Z's into their chests, and left their bodies in caves.
Savage.
In 2004, thinking that the Gulf Cartel was losing their hold on Nuevo Laredo, the Sinaloa Cartel moved in, looking to expand, and a turf war broke out. By 2008, Sinaloa had a firm grasp on the city, and everyone at the border was Chapo's eyes and ears.
Mia. In Nuevo Laredo, one call from one person who'd noticed that Junior and Peter weren't home and smelled a rat would guarantee an automatic hit on our whole family.
That's it.
It was even possible that Los Zetas would spot us, figure out who we were, and kill us just to rub it in El Chapo's face. Yet here we were, driving blind toward one of the most dangerous cities in Mexico, with no help, no protection, and no exit strategy.
My question is this. How long after the twins was out the door? Because they went another 9 months setting people up. Mind you, I don't expect the word to get from Chapo down to street level dealers, oh, the twins did this or that. But how more people didn't know that they were compromised at that point, I wish I could understand that timeline. You know what I'm saying? How long before they were gone, before it was on Chapo's radar? How long before they were gone that it finally got on everybody's radar in the States, and was it too late by then and everybody was rolled up in it?
Olivia. I had Benjamin and Brandon in the back seat in the car seats, and it was the first time I'd driven alone with them. Junior had always been in the car with me, and I'd always sat in the back with my boys. Luckily, Benjamin was so tiny that more than half the time he'd be asleep, and Brandon was so used to driving long distances in Mexico, like back and forth from Puerto Vallarta to Guadalajara, that I knew we wouldn't have to stop much, probably only for meals and potty breaks. Mia was alone in her car with my poor niece, who wasn't even 2 weeks old. Adrian was driving with Daniela and their new baby. Daniela's kids were driving another car, and my in-laws were in a 5th car.
All driving through enemy territory in some very conspicuous, loud, easily seen vehicles.
We probably could have piled into fewer cars, but we all thought, probably stupidly, we have warehouses full of vehicles, so why not take as many as we can? Still, we had to leave a dozen behind.
Damn.
Mia. We abandoned everything that didn't have sentimental value or that we wouldn't need on the road. We scrapped our Ferraris, ATVs, and even our plane. There just wasn't time to grab any of our valuables. We knew it would all get stolen in a matter of time, and we later found out that within a few weeks, Junior and Peter's associates had taken everything: designer clothes, handbags, man bags, Viking appliances, ATVs, jet skis, motorcycles, and all of our cars.
So she said within weeks they had already cleaned them out over there. So they knew that they weren't coming back.
They even took the chandeliers and light switches off the walls. It was a free-for-all for everyone, even their closest friends.
Olivia. We couldn't care less about our stuff, and it was the last thing on our minds as we started driving. We just wanted to make it to the border, to our safety zone. Without stops, Nuevo Laredo is a good 12-hour drive from Guadalajara, and we didn't get there till 3 in the morning. We were terrified at the idea of using our phones on the way. I kept thinking, what if someone's listening in? So I didn't call my family to tell them we were heading home to Chicago. I wasn't prepared to reveal the truth, and plus it sounded like a suicide mission. We were so paranoid, but with good reason. A line of Range Rovers, BMWs, and Mercedes trucks driving like bats out of hell is pretty much like standing out in the middle of the street with a sign that says, "Hey, we're a bunch of drug dealers escaping for our lives. Come kill us." When we finally got to Nuevo Laredo, we stopped at the Hilton to change the babies and get them ready for the long ride. I pulled my sleeping children out of the car, looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds. "We're not staying," I said to Adrian. "We have to keep going." Crossing in the middle of the night is a huge red flag. Let's just wait till morning. "No, we have to leave now," I said. "We have to get out of Mexico." After we stumbled back into our cars, we lined them up, with my truck leading the way since I'd crossed so many times before. As I exited the parking lot, I was so nervous and scared that I swerved out too far and hit something in the road, hard. I couldn't be sure, but I think it was a divider. I heard a muffled flap, grind, flap, and as my wheel rim started to scrape against the road, I knew what had happened. I had a flat tire, right there in the middle of cartel-infested Nuevo Laredo. It was a bad one, too. Whatever I hit ripped my tire right off the rim. I jumped out of the car, my baby still in the back, grabbed my head in the middle of the street, and started freaking the fuck out. "Let's just leave it! I don't care! Let's forget the car!" Bear in mind that this was a $150,000 Range Rover. In Mexico, you can't use credit or get a loan for a car purchase, so we'd paid all cash for it. I loved that stupid car, but I loved my life a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, fuck that car.
My nephews hopped out of their car and started to jack my Range Rover up. "Stop!" I screamed. "Let's just leave it." I walked over to them to try to push them back in their cars. I swear to God, I thought that, at any minute, someone was going to drive by and shoot all of us. The truth was, they might have, because Adrian's phone had just started ringing.
Mia, Adrian, and Daniela were in the car behind me. I kept looking in the rearview mirror and seeing Adrian lift his phone to his ear, then start barking something or other into it. I knew none of this was good. It wasn't even dawn on a Monday morning, and in drug dealer time, the workday had just begun. People had started calling, Junior or Pete, heard their calls go straight to voicemail and figured something was up. Junior and Peter...
The cat's out the bag, y'all.
Always answer their phones. No one had my number or Olivia's number, but they all knew Adrian's. "They keep calling! What the hell am I supposed to tell them?" Adrian shouted at Olivia, who was still railing against Daniela's son to just give up and let her ditch the Range Rover. "How the fuck do I know?" she said. "Just tell them they're still sleeping." With new babies and schedules like theirs? No way. There was no possible way their workers wouldn't realize that things were really off. We couldn't get around it. I couldn't believe the situation we were in. My C-section stitches hadn't even healed, and I was still in pain.
Damn.
Anytime Bella had cried during the drive, I'd had to pull over, hop in the back seat, and nurse her. We're so close, I thought, as I looked straight ahead out my windshield. I can see the border. There were agents with huge guns pacing back and forth, questioning cars and letting people through. We're so fucking close, I thought. And then suddenly, I just lost control. It had all become too much. I grabbed the steering wheel and exploded. "We're never going to get out of here. We're going to die here." I loosened my grip, raised my fists, and started pounding as hard as I could on the steering wheel. I paused, felt even more helpless, and started pounding harder, screaming at the top of my
You gotta relax.
lungs. I didn't care if I woke Bella up. She was a baby and she wouldn't remember. But if I didn't let out my rage, I thought I might actually get out of the car and try to run for the border. Then I saw Olivia's car start moving.
Olivia. Daniela's son fixed my tire faster than anyone at Maida's ever had, and I got the hell off that street as quickly as I could. Seeing the border crossing in front of me, I gunned it. The other cars fell into line right behind me, and I zipped right along toward an open booth.
Now, I don't know if I missed it right now or something, but I remember they had the whole hotel situation that they were going to stay at a hotel. And they stood at the hotel. They decided to stay at the hotel, and then the nephew had spoke to his girlfriend and let the cat out the bag where they were at, and they had to jump up out the hotel and head back towards the border. So I don't know, again, some things were different in this book than they were in the podcast, so that might be one of those things. But we skipped that. We straight to the borderline right now.
It was so early that most of the lanes were actually open. "Hello," I said as I rolled down my window, handed the agent my passport and my kids' birth certificates, and waited to move right through. The officer looked at my stack of papers a little too closely, for a little too long. "No, you can't go," he said. "You have to turn around." My heart stopped. What the fuck? What do you mean? Now, I know that's not how you're supposed to speak to an armed government official, but I was in no mood to be polite. "You have Mexican plates and your children were born in Mexico. You have to have a proper visa for them to cross." He stepped back and moved his arms, like he wanted me to pull over. I was desperate but was trying not to sound like it. "But I'm their mother, and my baby is 2 months old. I'm an American. How are we going to get in?" "Go back and get proper documentation for the minors and we'll let you through."
Bruh, do you not understand? We are on the run right now, right? Call the consulate, call the president, call whoever you got to call. They're at the border getting pushed around. You need to have proof of address. If you could bring me a bill, a light bill, a gas bill, whatever that is, a social security number. Like, come on, man. We on the run. We lucky we made it this far.
The guard motioned once again for me to turn my car around. I just sat there in park and stared at him. Being nice wasn't going to work, so maybe being batshit crazy would. I started yelling, "They're going to kill us! We're all going to be fucking killed!" The guard backed up, acting like he was either going to bring out reinforcements to arrest me or run because he thought I was a suicide bomber. I kept going. "Let us through now, or we're all going to die!"
Hey.
I looked around me.
She pulled the panic card. She hit the panic button.
And I could see everyone else getting out of their cars. My father-in-law was arguing with someone, and Adrian had just thrown his hands in the air. Mia was white as a ghost. The Border Patrol officer had lifted up his walkie-talkie to call for backup. I didn't know what else to do, so I jumped out of the car and started screaming, "They're going to fucking kill us if you don't let us through!"
They're like, relax.
Mia.
No pa tanto.
Before we'd left, I'd been careful to gather together all the paperwork I'd stashed away next to my bed. I had my birth certificate as well as Peter's. I had my passport and Bella's birth certificate. I even had a notarized letter written by Peter stating that our daughter could cross the border. But it was no use. They wouldn't let me through because Bella had been born in Mexico, and I didn't have a visa for her. I was so in shock that I hardly remember walking into the border agent's office. All I can recall was how cold it was when I stepped out of my car. It was that kind of pre-dawn wetness you often feel in Chicago, but rarely in Mexico. The type of chill that you just can't shake off.
That cold humidity.
Unless you bundle up right away. As I wrapped a blanket around Bella and zipped up the only coat I'd brought along, I just remember thinking, it never gets cold like this in Mexico. But all bets were off at that point. It could have started snowing, and honestly, I wouldn't have been fazed.
Olivia. When I walked into the border agent's office and saw Mia sitting there shivering, I jumped into Mama Bear mode. "You cannot just let her sit there like that," I said. "She's freezing." I would have done anything to protect my family at that point. I was so desperate to get us across the border. Finally, though, I had an idea. I pulled out my phone and dialed a saved number. On the third ring, a person on the other end picked up. "Good morning, this is Matt," said a friendly voice on the other end of the line. Thank God he's up, I thought. I knew that a lot of DEA agents started the day before dawn, so I wasn't all that surprised that he'd answered. I was totally wired, but I explained the situation to him as calmly as I possibly could.
Who's she call?
I pulled out my phone and dialed a saved number. On the third ring, a person on the other end picked up. "Good morning, this is Matt," said a friendly voice on the other end of the line. Thank God he's up, I thought. I knew that a lot of DEA agents started the day before dawn, so I wasn't all that surprised that he'd answered. I was totally wired, but I explained the situation to him as calmly as I possibly could. "Let me talk with the border guards," he said after listening, and I handed my phone over to one of them. They talked for what felt like forever. But when the agent closed up the phone and motioned for me and Mia to come over, I realized we might be okay. Matt must have told them to search the hell out of us because, when they took us outside again, they scanned our cars from top to bottom. We stood there for probably 3 or 4 hours while they x-rayed the insides and outsides.
Yeah, that DEA agent was like, listen, this is the mistake we don't want to make. They come on the run over here, but while they're on the run, they done put 60 keys per Escalade coming through the border as they turn themselves in. They X-ray gave the whole caravan an MRI and shit.
Dialed a saved number. On the third ring, I handed my phone over to one of them. They talked for what felt like forever. But when the agent closed up the phone and motioned for me and Mia to come over, I realized we might be okay. Matt must have told them to search the hell out of us because, when they took us outside again, they scanned our cars from top to bottom. We stood there for probably 3 or 4 hours while they x-rayed the insides and outsides, then brought out the dogs to sniff every inch. The whole time I was like, do they honestly think I'd be trying to bring drugs over the border when I'm running for my fucking life? Then it hit me. We were always going to be treated like criminals, because that's what our husbands were. Everything checked out, so the agents led us toward our cars. We put the babies in their car seats, got in ourselves, turned the keys, and put them in gear. As I glanced in my rearview mirror, I was afraid of what was behind us, but I was more terrified of what was to become of us. Still, there was nothing I could do. Just as during every other bad thing that had happened in my life, I had to make a decision, take action, and hopefully learn something and be a better person because of it. Here goes nothing, I thought, and I began driving across the U.S. border toward the rest of my very uncertain life.
Listen, even then, she didn't know how uncertain, considering the position that they're in today. Life, boy, life is something else.
Mia. Adrian, my father-in-law, and one of our nephews were stuck at the border. Adrian had been deported the day he'd been released from federal prison years before. My father-in-law had a huge criminal history, and our nephew didn't have his birth certificate with him, so they weren't going to get clearance to cross till they got their papers straight with U.S. immigration.
That's a trifecta of problems right there, you know what I'm saying? 2 criminals and 1 kid without papers, that was a holdup.
Daniela, her children, and my mother-in-law stayed back with them, but that didn't make us feel any better.
Olivia. They hugged us goodbye and said, "Don't worry, we'll switch hotels every day. We'll be fine." But we didn't know if we'd ever see them again. Matt had promised to work on their paperwork, but he hadn't offered to protect them. Adrian's phone was still ringing off the hook, and it was a matter of days before someone was going to put 2 and 2 together and start to search around Nuevo Laredo for him. I'd always been close to Adrian and Daniela, and I felt like I was saying goodbye to them forever. I honestly thought we would never see our family again. After we crossed and got back into our cars, I said to Mia, "Let's just keep going, all the way." "Are you sure?" she asked. "We're exhausted." "Yes, definitely." My adrenaline was pumping, and I felt like I could drive all the way to Canada if I had to. It was going to be a 20-some-hour drive, and I'd be damned if I was going to stop for the night.
Mia, when you have 1,400 miles ahead of you and what feels like a lifetime in your rearview mirror, you have a lot of time to think. I spent half the drive worrying about Bella in the back seat, and the other half wondering what was happening to Peter. But when I actually stopped and took stock, I realized this is the first time in almost 5 years I've been alone. Peter had done absolutely everything for me. I'd never had to step up to the plate and take care of myself. Now I had to do that and protect my daughter. Olivia and I had bought new phones after we crossed, and I'd called my mom right away. Now she was calling every 5 minutes to find out where I was. I'd told her everything, finally, that Peter and Junior were traffickers, that they'd become informants.
Bruh, that's when you decided to break it to them? When you're on your way? Wow. Again, we know they're adults. Father's a cop. I'm sure they smelt it. They just didn't want to, expose the truth to themselves or expose the awkwardness to their family. But she coming clean on the way in, on the way away from, running.
That they'd surrendered at the airport and that we'd escaped with our lives. Every detail had made Mom frantic. "Are you okay? Where are you? Why don't you stop?" she kept saying. I'd respond, "Mom, I love you, but I'm trying to drive. I can't have you calling me all the time. I have to keep my full attention on the road." 4+ years of time and distance, and I was still her baby. I guess some things never change. My plan was to go to their house while Olivia checked into a hotel. This would be the first time my family had met Bella, and I kept hoping that she'd take some of the pressure off. I needed it, desperately. With our lawyer's assistance, Peter had finally gotten clearance to call me midway through our drive, and while I was so happy to hear from him, it had left me a complete wreck. "I can't believe it took you so long to get over the border, baby," he said. "I was worried sick about you the whole time. I've been so scared thinking something happened to you." I didn't want to dwell on it, so I changed the subject. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "They have us hiding in some random hotel in Mexico City. To get us here, the feds covered our faces, locked the hotel down, and snuck us in." Mexico City? Why the hell were they there? I thought. Mexico City was one of their main hubs. "We're a block away from one of our stash houses. We can actually see it from our hotel window.
Crazy.
They've still got us recording and working, and we've met with every single bureau you can think of. Homeland Security, U.S. Customs, the DEA and FBI. We've been answering questions and getting debriefed, but no one's been willing to tell me anything about you."
So these guys got told, meet us at the airport, got taken to Mexico City to a hotel a block away from a stash of theirs. In Mexico City, where everybody intermingles and everybody's everywhere, there's eyes everywhere. They're in a hotel where they could see one of their stash houses from the window. He said while they got them working, which means they're still on the phone running the business and shutting down operations left and right, and then debriefing with all these different law enforcement agencies all at the same time. It's crazy, dog.
"All I've done is ask about my family, and no one's told me a fucking thing." So not only were they in as much danger as we'd been, but they were totally in the dark, flying blind, just like we were.
Olivia. It was 24 hours from the border to Chicago, and we made it there the next day. 24 freaking hours on the road, and we only stopped when we had to feed the babies, change a diaper, or use the bathroom. When we got to Chicago, I said goodbye to Mia, then checked into a hotel near the airport.
Mia. I thought about going to the hotel with Olivia, but I couldn't stand the thought of not being with my family. I needed them just to feel safe. When I arrived at the house I grew up in, my parents, brother, and sister were standing in the doorway, already crying their eyes out. I parked the car, then carried Bella in her car seat up the steps. Mom looked at me for a split second, grabbed the car seat from me, and carried it in. Then she placed it on the kitchen table and unstrapped my daughter, her second granddaughter. As my dad held me around the waist with one arm and my sister grabbed my hand, I watched my mom, who'd been practically a baby herself when she'd had me, lift Bella up to her shoulder and hold her, rubbing her back. "It's all okay. You're home. You're safe," she whispered to her. I knew she was, but I wish I'd felt the same.
Yeah, nobody's safe.
As I watched each member of my family pass my daughter back and forth, kissing her sweetly, I thought to myself, this is not my home anymore. It's my parents'. My home is with Peter, and I may not ever have that again.
Olivia. I called my parents as soon as I got Brandon and Benjamin situated in the hotel room I checked into. I still hadn't told them the full truth. I'd never wanted to hurt them, especially after I'd put them through so much already.
This was a day for breaking news in this family, all right? Once it was too late, once you couldn't give it to them softly and hide the medicine in the food, no. Now we are forced to let all the cats out of all the bags, all the skeletons out of all the closets. Just let it be known. Tell them what you need to tell them. Even though they kind of had an idea. They probably didn't know to what extent. They probably didn't know how big and how deep. But they knew something was up.
I kept them in the dark so they could sleep better at night. When they came over, though, I broke down and told them everything. I couldn't lie anymore. Still, the look on my dad's face was pure disgust. I'd wanted so badly to protect him and Mom, and instead, I'd broken their hearts. When they left, I tried to collect myself. I felt so empty and alone. And as I stared at the ceiling, I wondered if Junior was doing the same. Then I called Joe. "Olivia, you shouldn't be in the city," he said. "Your lives are in danger. Check into a hotel far out of the city." "Where are Peter and Junior?" "They're going through the process. They'll go to the correctional facility downtown soon. They'll be well guarded, and they'll be together. But if anyone figures out you're in town, you might not be. Go somewhere outside the city limits." "I'll go to my house then." I'd kept a house in the suburb for years, so I gave him that address. "Someone will meet you there tomorrow to talk about next steps for you and Mia." Next steps could have meant anything, so it wasn't worth asking. Instead, I packed up what little I had and left with my sons.
Right.
While
Next step, y'all didn't help us with the first step.
I was on the road driving the few miles out to my house, I called Mia and told her that she should meet me there the next morning.
Mia. When Olivia called and said we weren't safe in the city and had to leave, I was devastated. I didn't want to endanger my family, but I hated the idea of being without them. I'd had Bella less than 2 weeks before, and I was still in pain from my C-section. I barely had anything but the clothes on my back, and I didn't just need help, I needed love. I wanted my family, and I ached for Peter.
Ain't no time for love right now. If you want life, you're going to have to trade life for love.
I'm really on my own, I kept thinking. And this is what it's going to feel like for years and years. My dad was crushed when I left with Bella. "Baby, just stay," he said. "I can protect you." I know he felt like he could. But let's be honest, no one was really able to. Olivia and I were on our own, and that's why we had to get away.
Olivia. My house was about 45 minutes out of the city. I'd decorated it exactly like my home in Guadalajara. Decorative pillows covering big, plush couches and huge rugs spanning wall to wall. But there were none of the little Mexican knickknacks and touches that I'd put everywhere in Guadalajara. It felt empty, not warm or full of love like my home with Junior. It was an American home, far, far away from Mexico.
Facts.
Hugging my babies, I just sat on the steps and bawled my eyes out, thinking, I don't even have the strength or will to keep going.
Mia. When I looked around, I suddenly felt sad all over again. I'd never been happier in my life than in Mexico, I thought. I know it was a dangerous life to live, but we were all together. We were a family there.
Olivia. Joe had hired 24-hour security for us, so when Mia arrived, there were armed guards waiting to greet her. A few hours later, they let in a woman named Carol Williams from the Witness Protection Program. Carol was friendly, with a warm, pleasant smile. She seemed nice enough, but honestly, I don't think she knew what she was walking into. Peter and Junior were prepared to be the biggest drug informants in U.S. history, and we had targets on our heads just because we were married to them. "Good morning," she said when I offered her a seat. Then she dove right into the subject that had brought her to my house. "So, as you know, your lives are in danger, and we'd like that not to be the case." I wasn't going to pull any punches with her, so I cut her off. "We've been telling you that for the last 3 days,
Right.
but no one from the government has helped us. Not one fucking bit, except for Matt, and I made that happen.
3 days? No. Last 9 months, they ain't helped you with nothing.
It took us hours to get across the border, and our in-laws just got out yesterday. The U.S. attorneys had to work to get them clearance. That took a few days, and they had to jump around the border from hotel to hotel. They could have been killed on your watch. We could have been killed. We're not going to be your sitting ducks." Carol just sat there, straight-faced. But she didn't apologize. "What we can offer you now are 2 spots in the Witness Protection Program. We'll give you new names and relocate you and your children." Mia and I had talked about this beforehand.
Once again, these voice actresses, they on point, bro. She just gave the proper commercial. That lady's reading some script that she gets from her job, telling them about what they're going to get. That's robot shit. That's just the way it's handled.
But we still had real questions. "When would we see our husbands?" I asked, knowing what the answer would be. "You'll be far away from their prisons, but even if you travel to see them, we can't allow unscheduled visits. You'll see them once a year, maybe, and it's entirely scheduled and supervised. We can't permit calls unless we set them up weeks in advance." Then she paused. "Your lives will be very different and very separate from your husband's." "Would we be near each other?" Mia asked. "No. You'd be in different parts of the country." I didn't even look at Mia when I started talking for both of us. We were on the same page about this, no questions asked. I couldn't lose the only person in the world who understood me, and she couldn't give up the only person in the world who reminded her of home. We were sisters, and no one was going to separate us.
They were in the same circumstance, and it's a circumstance they got into together, and they were trying to get out of together.
"Never," I said. "We gave up everything. Our husbands sacrificed themselves for the love of our family and to give our children better lives. And the last thing we want to do now is break our family up. Our husbands need us, and we need them. And there's no way our babies are going to grow up not knowing their dads. Mia and I only have each other, and we cannot get through this alone. So our answer is absolutely no." Carol looked at both of us in shock. "You're making a huge mistake. This is a terrible risk." "It's a risk we want to take," Mia said. Carol nodded slowly. "Then it was wonderful to meet you, and I wish you all the best." Together, we walked her to the door and showed her out, thanking her for her time. Then we went back to the couch, sat down, and without saying a thing, reached for each other's hands. We're in this together for the long haul, I thought. It might be 20 years till we're back with our husbands, and we'll sure as hell never be living on the beach in Mexico again, but we'll always have each other, and we're not giving up.
Think of the irony in that last sentence, man. Considering that both of those women are serving prison time right now.
It might be 20 years till we're back with our husbands.
Crazy.
And we'll sure as hell never be living on the beach in Mexico again, but we'll always have each other, And we're not giving up.
They didn't even know how true those words were when they wrote them for this book. So they made it across the border. And I will say the difference between this and the Surviving El Chapo podcast, I feel like it was more dramatic in the Surviving El Chapo podcast. It was more cinematic. You kind of got a better sense of the hell that they were going through on the way out of Mexico and the danger that they were going through on the way out of Mexico. This was a little bit more cut and dry. They just ran you through the process of what happened. That last line, very poignant. 20 years later, so think about it, they lost their husbands for 12 and a half years. Husband's home a couple years, and then the feds come down on the women, and now the women gone for what's supposed to be 3.5 years. Didn't know how real that was when they wrote it, but here it is.